But of course, let's get to Albo's very bad day. Yet another very bad day. Yet another day when millions of Australians can see he is not up to it. Now, as you know, his media strategy after coming out of COVID was to hide behind his shadow ministers.
At the moment, you and others are getting tax breaks on properties.
I'll be here. Yeah. Albo can supplement. Yeah, sure, but Albo can supplement.
And then we have to go join the march. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Anthony.
We do that. Thanks very much. Thank you.
And then, of course, yesterday there was the ridiculous scenario of this everyone gets one question, and when one person didn't get a chance to answer the question or ask their question, he didn't even bother to answer that.
People like you, Mr Albanese, who own 3 or 4 properties to sell to create a bigger pool of housing which would lower prices. At the moment, you and others are getting tax breaks on properties.
I'll be here. Albo can supplement. Yeah, sure, but Albo can supplement.
Well, all of it is being noticed by you, by me, and by people, even on the Today Show, like Alison Langdon, who I tell you what is fast becoming the gold standard when it comes to actually taking this bloke on.
But look, I mean, just this week, right, on Monday you deflected a question about interest rates to Jim Chalmers and a question on wages to Tony Burke.
To the Shadow Treasurer. The Shadow Treasurer asked to answer the question about the economy.
You were asked a question and you deferred to him. Then on Tuesday, it was a question about housing to Jason Clare. My question is, why don't you know the answers?
And I do, Ali. Jason Clare's the Housing Shadow Minister.
See, I mean, the thing is there, you say you know the answers, but I think people sitting at home go, I'm not sure you do, because you don't see Scott Morrison handing over to anyone during this campaign. Question is, though, you want to be the next Prime Minister. You want to run the country. Shouldn't you be across your briefs?
I am, Ali. I am. Stop reading from the Liberal Party notes that they send through to people all of the time, Ali.
They're not Liberal Party notes, they're normal people seeing that this bloke is trying to pull Aussie Joe Biden, trying to pretend that he's the reasonable face of a far-left coalition filled with 4/5 of bugger-all policies, and the ones that they do have are falling apart before your very eyes. Now, last night I was very direct with the reporters who surround Albanese, that they had to push back on this garbage of one person gets one question, he doesn't answer it, and then they move on. Today, they didn't move on.
Do you not know what the 6 points are for the NDIS question that Mr Kersley just asked you, but also...
But look, I mean, just this week, right, on Monday you deflected a question about interest rates to Jim Chalmers.
Can I make this point? No, everyone gets one question. I did answer the question. Bonus question for Sarah.
We know that
because she's been polite there.
See, this is hubris. This is a bloke who thinks he already has won the election and doesn't have to go through the application process, because he's used to that when it comes to the way his career has moved forward over the years. He became the Deputy Prime Minister because Rudd made him so. He was able to become the Labor Party leader because a backroom deal was done to push Tanya Plibersek out of the way. He now assumes that everyone in Australia thinks like Twitter does and Scott Morrison is toast. But you and I know that's not true, because elections are a choice and this choice has consequences. You see, the trick that they are trying to pull, I repeat, the Aussie Joe Biden trick, is they are trying to pretend that if they can slide through an election, then you won't notice what happens on the other side of it. But the absolute reality is you are hiring somebody for a job for the next 3 years. In terms of the government, you judge them off their performance of the previous 3 years. A performance, by the way, that despite a global pandemic resulted in a lower unemployment rate than we have had in decades, more people with a job than ever before in the country, more people with savings in their bank account, the number of people who moved their interest rates from variable to fixed doubling in the past 12 months. Businesses are starting to get back up on their feet. America has gone backwards in the past 3 months in terms of economic growth. We are going forwards. So for the Labor Party, they have to tell us what they plan to do with the next 3 years, but they don't. What they have is a bunch of half Band-Aid solutions in order to be able to list off a collection of things they plan to do for the next 3 years. But we know what the reality of the next 3 years will be. We are at the same point we were in 2007, and Australia had buyer's remorse when they just made a change for the sake of it. America right now is living buyer's remorse because they made a change all based on personality. So this bloke who is so cocky in telling everyone and all and sundry, I'm across the detail, I'm ready to go, well, of course, fell apart today, and even news.com.au had to cover it.
In your speech later on today, you'll talk about the legacy of Labor leaders. One of those legacies is the NDIS. Yesterday, you talked about Labor's 6-point plan. What are the 6 points?
The 6 points are what we will do in terms was outlined by Bill Shorten. What that's about is making sure. What that's about is well, if you let me answer the question, what that's about is making sure that we take pressure off people who are at the moment having their programs cut.
That's just stuff that you sort of say to win a dinner party. But this bloke needed, like a toddler, his blankie to be able to get through the press conference. So he was handed by a staffer a binder full of notes, of which he shuffled live on national television through until he found the one to read. Now, this didn't jog his memory, he read from it.
Are they the 6 points? Are these the 6 points here that had to be handed to you by your advisor?
Mr Albanese?
That's not right. Did you just ask for just saw you,
You've just been handed the 6 points, Mr Albanese. What are they?
Our policy on the NDIS is to defend and fix the NDIS, lifting the NDIS staffing cap, doubling existing funding for advocacy, fixing regional access and stopping waste.
Seriously? You got to see a bloke who wants to be the leader of the country who is behaving like a taxi driver who has no idea where he's going until he can double check with the map first. Is that who you want to navigate rising interest rates? The question I've been asking all week is one I repeat again now. Would you bet your house on Albo? I wouldn't. And I don't believe the majority of Australians would. And I don't care what the published polls say. I don't care what the media experts claim. I don't care what Twitter proclaims. Australians are paying attention. They can see it, and they are seeing it over and over again. This bloke doesn't know anything about the basics for the job he is applying for.
Do you know the official cash rate off the top of your head?
Oh, look, we can do the old Q&A stuff over 50 different...
At the start of the year, when the Prime Minister couldn't say what the cost of petrol or the price of a loaf of bread was, he was ridiculed for being out of touch with Australians. Are you just not going to answer those kinds of specific questions for this campaign?
Not at all.
He doesn't know the unemployment rate, and when he guessed, he was wrong by 200,000 people.
No unemployment rate.
National unemployment rate at the moment is... I think it's 5.4. Sorry, I'm not sure what it is.
He couldn't answer a yes-no question about his party's own policy on temporary protection visas, 1/3 of Operation Sovereign Borders.
Do you remain committed to Operation Sovereign Borders, and if so, do you support the retention of temporary protection visas?
Yes, we don't support temporary protection visas.
And then there's his deputy, Richard Marles, who, of course, has been caught during this campaign praising China, its record on human rights, and giving them speeches to check before he delivers them. This block of wood, well, he popped up during COVID isolation to tell the truth about the Labor Party's housing plan, which is if you qualify for the scheme but get a job promotion, you have to hand back as much as $380,000 there and then to the federal government. And if for whatever reason you're able to keep the same amount of money through the entirety when you sell the house, you still have to hand them back 40%, but that includes all of the money that's been gained by rising property prices. So they give you 380, but you have to hand back 500.
Want to keep, who have means, want to keep the house in the family, that can be done.
What if they can't afford it though?
Well, the point of this scheme is to provide an option for people who face a lifetime of rental. This actually gives people an option. If the home if the child qualifies, the home gets passed on. That's simple.
Yeah, that's
fine. If the
fine.
child doesn't qualify,
but yeah, this is the crux here.
If the child doesn't qualify, well, then those kids would have, those kids would have an option of buying the government out.
And then, of course, there's the bloke who last election was the shadow treasurer behind $300 billion worth of extra taxes, a war on self-funded retirees via things like franking credits, who said, if you don't like it, don't vote for us. Now he's in charge of climate change policy. Now, Albo and the rest want to pretend that nothing will change here when they will start using price disincentive, a price on pollution of the 215 biggest polluters in the country. Put simply, that means every coal mine, doesn't it, Minister?
So yes, we will require the 215 emitters to reduce their emissions to net zero by 2050. So does that is what the Business Council has asked to happen.
Does it include coal mines?
Yes.
But then Labor says it doesn't. So who doesn't understand the policy? The local Labor MP who's lying to their constituents, or the bloke who wrote the policy and is telling you the truth up front? And this is how bad today was for Albo. Even the ABC and their fact-checking unit is saying that he is wrong, i.e. lying on claims about how big debt and deficits are. Penny Wong too, she got a bang as well for not telling the full story about the amount of aid being given to the Pacific Islands. Even the ABC is saying they are liars. And again, in the Channel 9 newspapers, those far right-wing rags are now saying that Labor is starting to go backwards, not forwards where they'd win 10 seats in Queensland. They're going backwards and they're starting to underperform because each way Albo is not the preferred Prime Minister by 11 points in Victoria. So all hopes for them lie in South Australia, Western Australia and in Tasmania. But Jackie Lambie made a preference deal today that could well save one of the two Liberal seats in Tasmania. So if the Liberals are able to hold the line in Queensland, improve their vote in New South Wales and Victoria, this thing is razor thin. This bloke has not just had a bad day, a bad few days. He's had a bad campaign and most importantly, he has been exposed as a flake, as a fraud and as a liar. Australians won't cop it, and rightly so.